It's good to see many of my good friends here and a few others. Hope springs eternal. I'm going to take a little bit of a different shift here. We're here at a Republican convention. There are some considerations concerning the platform. Many of you, the last time I saw you, have kind of a different family situation now. I have 4 kids that are still at home. 4 of my kids are now out. I've got 3 married adult children, became a grandfather in December, which is it's a mind shift for me. I still consider myself pretty internally young, but it started me thinking about where are we, of course, always the future of the country is in my mind, but when you think about the next generation and the next generation beyond that, what kind of a future are they going to have? And we have several different forces that are fighting right now in our country today, many of which want to expand government, expand dependency, continue us on a path basically that leads us to a point of less liberty and more control by the federal government, something that doesn't really create much of a future for our kids. And I'm convinced that the Republican Party, in its platform, stands alone in a way that none others will. But the point is that our platform isn't always followed. You know, Ronald Reagan, and he told this story far better than I can, but I'll give it a shot anyway, told a story about a Republican candidate that went out into a rural area, I think it was somewhere in California. And this is an area that had been a Democratic stronghold for years and years and years. And he walks up to a farmer's house, farmer comes out. He says, "Hey, what are you doing?" The candidate says, "Well, I'm a Republican candidate for the Congress." And the farmer is just dumbfounded. He'd never seen a Republican before. He said, "I got to go get Ma. I got to go get Ma. We've never seen a Republican around here." So he goes inside, gets his mother, comes back out, and the candidate prepares to do his stump speech. He looks around, and there's this pile of fertilizer out back, and he stands up on that for his platform and gives maybe one of the most rousing speeches that he's ever given. And at the conclusion of that speech, the mom, she said, "Boy, I've never heard a speech by a Republican, and that was a pretty good speech." And the candidate said, for the Republican candidate for the Congress said, "Well, I've never given a speech from the Democratic platform either." Well, hopefully when this convention ends, we don't have a platform like that. I'm running for United States Senate because we have a problem with the establishment, because we've got to turn this nation around. Currently, we have what I call the Republican Surrender Caucus that has allowed this government to grow at an expanse beyond anything that has been seen in recent era. In fact, much of the growth of the federal government, its blame lays right at the feet of the Republicans. And that's because they haven't embraced the platform that we have. You know, for 34 years, of the last 34 years, we've had 4 years in which the Republicans have not controlled the Senate or the House or the presidency. In other words, for 30 of the 34 years, we've had control of at least one body of the federal government. And yet the government has continued to expand and expand. I'm not interested in voting for another Me Too Republican. I'm not interested in going along to get along. I'm not interested in going to Washington, D.C. and deciding that we're just going to be part of the problem rather than part of the solution. I believe that it's time for Alaska to send somebody to the United States Senate who's going to stand unabashedly for the U.S. Constitution and who is going to stand up firm in the face of immense pressure to continue this country and the federal government in the direction it's going. Now, I don't think that this country, if it continues in the direction it's going, has a lot of time left. We're at $200 trillion in future unfunded liabilities. The single biggest threat to Alaska in its future is the debt. $17 trillion in actual debt. At my launch in Wasilla a couple of weeks ago, a pastor gave a little speech with a word story about the amount of that debt. If you have a $100 bill and you stack each one of those $100 bills and you get $17 trillion in those $100 bills, it goes to the moon and back by some calculations 5 times. It's an unimaginable number. And we know that that debt at some point has to be repaid. If we continue where we're headed, we either head toward default or we end up in a situation of hyperinflation because the government prints money to make up for the debt. It would be catastrophic to a state that is dependent on the federal dollar. Now, I think that when we look at the platform of the Republican Party, there are a lot of things that we can do to restrict that. I've sat on the Central Committee. I've been a district chair, a regional chair, been in the executive committee. I understand how important it is to have a good platform. I understand the challenges that are confronting the convention when people want to make changes to it, revisions to it. But I believe that attempts to water down the current platform would be catastrophic to this party. I think equivocating on traditional values would be a monumental mistake. If you want to defeat Mark Begich this fall, getting rid of the Reagan coalition is the wrong way to do it. Now remember, President Reagan once chastised the Republican Party. In fact, he ran against a sitting Republican president, right? He was called stupid, crazy, even an extremist. He knew what it was like to fight the establishment in an attempt to change the course of the nation, and in fact, he did that. Now, Reagan was right when he said, let's have a Republican Party raising a banner of bold colors, no more pale pastels, a banner instantly recognizable as standing for certain values which will not be compromised. There is no doubt that our country is founded on principles, Judeo-Christian principles. That's the view of the world. Our founders were right. Rights come from God. They don't come from government. If you sit back and think that rights come from government, obviously government gives, it can take away. One of the reasons why our Constitution has outlived 4 such documents in France is because we're based on that foundation. A party that gets unhinged from its philosophical moorings will be a party left within the whim of mob rule. And I think also will be consigned to the ash heap of history. Let's just think back on the history of this country, the Whig Party. What happened with it? During one of the biggest crises in this nation, that involving slavery, it decided to punt. And as a result, the Republican Party came into existence at that time. It was during the dying days of the Whig Party. Our party held up the banner that said slavery is morally wrong and the laws of the land should reflect what is eternally true. People rallied around that banner because deep down they knew what was right. And only 6 years after coming into existence, the Republican Party elected who? Abraham Lincoln. Now, on his way to the inauguration in Washington, Abraham Lincoln made a stop at Independence Hall. Speaking in front of Independence Hall, he said, quote, "I've never had a feeling politically that did not spring from the sentiments found in the Declaration of Independence." And like the founders, he pledged his life to upholding the truths that that document contained. Our first liberty is a God-given right to life. Without it, all other rights are meaningless. If we don't stand up for nation human life, if we don't stand up for the most defenseless in our society, there's not much that we're going to stand for. We know that human life has to be protected at all stages, from conception to natural death. It doesn't matter what your category is, disability, sex, manner of conception. The fact is, without due process of law, the federal government must protect that. And that's why I'm an unabashed supporter of Rand Paul's Life at Conception Act.
2-minute warning.
Many in our culture think that the traditional family is passé or unenlightened. Nothing could be further from the truth. The traditional family is the cornerstone of culture. Without it, we will go into upheaval and moral relativism. One of the things that really, absolutely, let's applaud that. You know, this is one of the foundations of our platform. It's not something that we ought to run away from. There was a recent stat that came out, and this shows that Republicans very much embrace traditional family. 82% of those that identify as Republican and those that are Republican-leaning say that we should define marriage as between one man and one woman. This is not a fringe topic, although the elites want to cram it down your throats. You have those that want to compromise the platform to supposedly expand the party. That's a mistake, folks. That's not going to head us in the right direction. We as a country, we as a party, I should say, need to embrace those foundations that make the country strong. Over 50% of babies today born to mothers under the age of 30 are born in single-headed households. The family is in a free fall. Let me talk about one of the crises that we're facing right now, one of the many crises that we're facing right now in the Republican Party. 54% believe that the party should move to the right. That's 54% of Republicans. But a majority of Republicans believe that we need a new party. And recently a poll just came out on April 24th that reflects this. A majority of Americans don't believe either party represents them. Ladies and gentlemen, voters are abandoning the party. And it's happening not because we're failing to compromise too much. They're doing that because we are moving in a direction opposite the foundation. We have to embrace the foundation of the party. America didn't come great by central planning. It didn't become prosperous by shutting down competition. It didn't become prosperous by bailing out failed businesses and picking the winners and losers. It was based on free enterprise and the foundations of this party. I challenge you to embrace the platform, keep it strong. I embrace that platform and encourage you also, as we march forward in this process, to take America back. I ask you to join with me, and I thank you for your support. Thank you for your opportunity to address you. God bless you.